The mark on Leora's wrist no longer hurt. It hummed, an old verdict in skin. Property. Omega. Useful when invisible. Wolfsbane and juniper in her collar blurred her senses until even her inner wolf was a whisper. The Iron Dominion's high atrium ran like a clock of marble and fear. Servants moved in grooves, glide, bow, vanish. You, said Matron Weiss, head of service. Group or it. Eyes down. If anyone notices you, you've failed. Her fingers pressed Leora's brand until light burst behind her eyelids. Remember the pits. In the linen passage she stole 3 breaths, proof she still belonged to herself. On the third, a glint behind a crate, a river-smoothed moonstone in pewter. Contraband. She slipped it into her hidden pocket. Bells tolled, 1 hour to the Concord moot. Back in the hall, guards took posts and stewards set crystal. Leora kept to her lane, serve, slide, disappear. Wind seemed to enter before the doors finished opening. The mountain packs had sent their ruler, Cale Draven, Alpha of Stormridge. The herbs failed at once. Her wolf surged, not to strike but to reach. A pull tightened between 2 points, her chest and the man whose presence landed like thunder after heat. Tall, broad, dark-haired, Cale moved as if restraint were a gift he extended to the room. His steel eyes swept, measuring, then stopped. On her. Training said down, empty, gone. The bond said mine. Before we go further, comment where you're watching from. I'd love to know where these videos are reaching. Heat flared at her pocket where the moonstone rested. Across the distance, Cale's stride hitched by a heartbeat. No one else would notice. She did. Wine girl, Matron Weiss hissed. Liora obeyed. At the orid table, Helvan's Cashin drifted an elbow to catch her forearm as she poured. The decanter tipped. Red bled across linen. Clumsy nothing, Cashin drawled, hand lifting. The blow never landed. A larger hand caught his wrist. Cale Draven stepped between Leora and the room, voice low. Touch her, he said, and you'll learn to count with the other hand. Silence fell like a dropped blade. Cashin's face went chalk pale under Cale's grip, tendons creaked. Around them, Alphas adjusted stances without standing, tiny shifts that confessed threat. Leora didn't breathe. The decanter hung from her fingers, light refracting in the trembling pool clinging to the lip. She's Dominion property, Cashin managed, smirking for an audience that suddenly seemed far away. A scented tool. Release my hand. Cale didn't look at him. His attention stayed on Leora, as if taking his eyes off her would be an affront to gravity. Name, he said, not a command, an opening. No one asked for names here. They demanded tasks. Liora, she heard herself say. Her wolf moved toward the sound, pressing at her throat. Cale's mouth tipped, approval without smile. Liora, he repeated, as if tasting a syllable he meant to keep. Then he spoke to the room. Stormridge recognizes an unclaimed Omega with a binding pull. Any hand raised to her will be answered by mine. The hall reacted like dry grass to spark. Murmurs. Calculations. Matron Weiss took a step, found nothing solid beneath it, and clutched her keys. Lord Draven, she said, calm as a drawn wire. Your rhetoric insults host law. Your law insults our treaty, Cale replied. He released Cashin's wrist. The air staggered back, cradling tendon and pride. Stormridge abolished chains when we learned they snap under rain, Cale added. You've only learned to polish yours. A low ripple of anger moved through Dominion ranks. Leora stared at the floor to avoid drowning in the attention now dragging over her like hooks. The moonstone in her pocket pulsed warm, matching the throb at her pulse. She should drop it. She should confess. She did neither. Why? Matron hissed, trying to rethread routine through a severed moment. Leora lifted the decanter. Cale's hand covered it, steadying without taking. The contact slammed through her, heat, pine, storm metal. Every old command in her back straightened at once and then, let go. This will be contested, said a gray-cloaked envoy near the dais. The Concord moot convenes to argue borders, not bonds. Bonds change borders, Cale said, finally releasing the crystal. He stepped aside, shield, not cage. I'll state claim in the moot, as law allows. She will stand under Stormridge protection until judgment. Claim. The word hit like cold water. Leora's vision narrowed to a bright ring around the Alpha's profile. Claim meant transfer. Transfer meant a new wall with different carvings. Her wolf uncurled, showing teeth at that thought. The Chancellor's staff struck marble 3 times, echoing like thunder. The moot had begun. Voices rose, layered with titles, territories, demands. But Liora hardly heard them. Her pulse was still entangled with the Alpha King who had spoken her name aloud as though it belonged to him, and only him. Stormridge wolves flanked Cale, loose-shouldered but brimming with restrained power. Dominion lords pressed their advantage, muttering of theft, of insult, of slaves dressed up as equals. Liora stood caught between 2 worlds, the shadows where she had always survived and the bright, brutal stage where Cale had placed her. When the Chancellor called for claims of grievance, a Dominion envoy rose first, voice sharp as glass. Stormridge arrives cloaked in false virtue. They bring with them a stolen asset, one of ours, an Omega branded and trained in the Dominion way. Return her, and we continue the moot. Keep her, and you spit on every treaty inked in blood. Cale did not rise. He unfolded. The weight of his presence stretched across the chamber like storm clouds rolling in from high ridges. Stormridge does not recognize ownership of wolves, he said, each word deliberate. You brand flesh because you fear spirit. I will not return her. Not now. Not ever. Gasps, growls, mutters. But he wasn't finished. His eyes swept the chamber until they found hers. This is Liora, he said, her name filling the hall. She chooses to stand here. That is the only mark that matters. The mate bond hummed, undeniable, and though Liora lowered her gaze by habit, her wolf lifted its head, proud, seen. For the first time, her existence was spoken as more than utility. She was not girl, not property. She was herself. The Dominion envoy sneered. Then let her speak for herself. All eyes turned. The weight of them pressed against her lungs. Her knees begged to bend. But Cale's presence at her side steadied her spine. Liora drew a single breath. Then another. She raised her chin enough to see the edges of the hall, though not brave enough to meet the Dominion's stare. I am not property, she said, voice fragile but unbroken. I will not be returned. The silence after her words carried more danger than the noise. The Dominion's envoy recovered first, lips peeling back from 2 even teeth. Pretty speeches, he said. Let the mood judge what matters. Produce the registry mark. Matron Weiss seized the opening. Her keys chimed like a threat. Show the wrist, Omega. Leora's fingers hovered. The leather cuff looked like any servant band, but beneath it the scar was a history lesson branded in iron. She imagined the room tasting it, deciding her fate on the tongue of that proof. Cale spoke before she could move. She will not bear a wound to satisfy your theater. His tone was mild. His power was not. Stormridge submits a counterpetition. The Dominion's use of brands violates the Moon Accord's Article 14. He placed a parchment onto the dais without ceremony. You invoke law, we'll use it. Pages rustled. The Chancellor's gaze flicked between seals, weighing consequence against custom. Around the chamber the scent shifted, ink, anxiety, old stone, and the metallic edge of looming challenge. Leora's inner wolf eased forward, alert, ears pricked. Not hiding. Watching. Cashin nursed his wounded pride with wine. Very noble, he drawled. Play lawyer for your pet. The word snapped something spine-deep. Liora didn't plan to speak, yet sound left her, low and steady. I am no one's pet. Eyes turned again. Cale did not look at her, and somehow that helped. He granted her the space his body had made. The Omega will be remanded to neutral quarters under Stormridge protection until adjudication, the Chancellor declared at last. His staff struck marble. Any interference risks sanction. Matron's jaw worked. She's a servant. She has duties. Tonight, Kale said. She has a door that locks from the inside. The decree moved like a ripple through power. Stormridge wolves shifted to escort. Dominion guards tightened, then thought better. Leora's legs felt like borrowed stilts as she stepped away from the shadow that had always been hers. Passing Matron, she expected the old lash, words sharpened into tiny knives. But the woman only watched her go with a look Liora couldn't parse. Pity? Envy? Resentment dressed as pragmatism? At the archway, Kale finally glanced back. Not at her brand, not at her collar, at her face. Food, water, rest, he said to a waiting aide. Then, softer, for her alone. Choice. The word landed where the brand had once burned and, impossibly, cooled it. They crossed a colonnade washed in dusk. The hall's noise thinned to birds settling in the eaves, to banners breathing, to her own steps measured against his longer stride. The moonstone in her pocket pulsed like a heartbeat that wasn't entirely hers. Confess, a practical part of her whispered. The bond will be blamed on the stone if they learn. Another part, wild, newly awake, answered, the stone didn't make thunder look at me. At a door banded in iron, a Stormridge sentinel bowed. Kale gestured inside and stopped on the threshold, careful with the invisible line. You're safe here. He hesitated. If you wish anyone else to stand guard, my sister, my captain, say so. Liora found her voice on the fourth try. If I wish you to stand there? His eyes warmed a fraction. Then I will. She stepped into the chamber. The latch settled, sure as a promise. The room was not gilt or cruelly fine. It was human-sized, soft wool underfoot, a hearth laid but unlit, a carafe sweating on the table. Someone had set simple food, broth, brown bread, a sliver of mountain cheese. It was the kind of meal that didn't demand you perform gratitude to deserve it. Liora stared until hunger overcame suspicion. The first spoonful of broth made her eyes sting. Her wolf tasted salt and bone and thyme and decided, for the moment, to trust. On the other side of the door, a body leaned, not heavy. He would never be heavy against the hinge meant to keep her choices hers, but present. When she set the bowl down, she could sense his attention shift, like a campfire noticing fresh kindling. She unbuckled the cuff. The scar was uglier than memory allowed, a crowned wolf's head ringed by lynx. The skin around it was puckered, the color of old arguments. She lifted the moonstone from her pocket and set it beside the brand. It glowed faintly, as if embarrassed to be compared with iron. I took something that isn't mine, she said aloud to the empty room, because honesty sounded less like danger if she owned it first. Then she crossed to the door. Kale straightened before she touched the latch. She could feel the air wake. When she opened it, the corridor's torchlight cut a clean line between them. He had removed the layers of ceremony. The leather at his wrists was scuffed, the throat of his tunic unlaced. Power didn't require polish to fit him. I found a stone, she said. Moonstone. Before you, before the hall. I should not have it. She held it out on her palm. If they say it made this. She gestured, helpless. I don't know what to answer. He didn't reach for the gem. His gaze stayed on her hand, then lifted to her face. Moonstone amplifies what exists, he said quietly. It does not invent thunder. He still didn't take it. Choice again, like a refrain. Liora closed her fingers around the stone, then set it on the table between them, as if laying down a weapon neither wanted to use. You should rest, he said. If I sleep, she answered, surprising herself. I'll dream the hall again. The blow. Your hand. The word pet. Shame and fury twined in her throat. I hate that a stranger's mouth can still make me that small. Kale's jaw flexed. Not the rage he'd shown to Cashin, something quieter and more dangerous, the kind of anger that built roads out of mountains simply to prove a promise wasn't a metaphor. We can counter smallness with truth. And what is the truth, my lord? The title slipped out. Old grooves. Kale, he corrected. And the truth is what you said in front of wolves who treat breath like currency. You are not property. Say it again here, where no one can buy the sound. Liora swallowed. I am not property. Again. I am not property. The wolf inside her lifted, shook itself, and sat where it could see the door. Cale inclined his head as if she'd presented a treaty. The moot reconvenes at first light. Dominion will press for proof. My council has motions ready. They'll try another angle if law resists, challenge spectacle. His mouth flattened. They will poke at fear until it bleeds. And if fear refuses? Then they will learn new weather. He stepped back from the threshold. I'll be here, he said. Or I'll send someone you choose. I choose you. The words left her before pride could varnish them. He went very still, as if a branch had cracked underfoot and the forest was deciding whether to hold its breath. Then he inclined his head again, this time not as a king but as a wolf accepting a duty given freely. Sleep, Liora. She closed the door. Across the room, the brand looked less like a verdict under the moonstone's quiet glow. She lay down and, for the first time in years, fell asleep before counting the dangers in the dark. Outside, Cale kept his post, and somewhere deep in the hall a bell marked the hour when cages begin to realize they were always only walls. Dawn crept over the iron dominion, painting the spires with grey fire. Inside the chamber, Liora woke before the hearth was lit. For a moment she forgot where she was, until her fingers found the scar on her wrist and the stone's faint glow across the table. Then memory returned, Cale's hand between hers and danger, his promise that she was not property. The knock was soft, meant to reassure, not command. She opened the door. Cale stood as he had promised, eyes rimmed with a night's vigil but steady, unshaken. The moot calls again, he said. Are you ready? Was anyone ever ready to stand against chains they had worn so long? Her wolf answered first, rising in her chest, yes. Her voice followed, fragile but present. I will not hide. They walked together down the columned hall. Stormridge wolves flanked them, some in human form, some letting their eyes shine silver with their beasts close to the surface. Dominion courtiers whispered as she passed. Omega. Branded. Stolen. Claimed. But none dared step close. The moot chamber brimmed with tension. Banners of rival packs drooped in stale air, each symbol a demand for power. The Chancellor struck his staff. We reconvene. Stormridge asserts unlawful branding. Dominion asserts lawful possession. The Omega in question will answer. Leora's knees threatened to fold, but Cale shifted half a step, near but not touching. His presence steadied her spine like a beam across a roof. She lifted her chin. My name is Liora, she said, each word a chisel on old stone. Not girl. Not property. I was taken, branded, silenced. But today I speak. And I will not return. Gasps cut the air. Some voices cursed. Some wolves bowed their heads as if an old law had just been spoken again for the first time. The Dominion envoys spat. Moonstone trickery. False bond. Produce proof. The Chancellor's gaze darkened. Proof or not, the wolf has spoken. Her words stand in the record. Cale's voice joined, deep and implacable. Stormridge accepts her declaration. She stands under my protection until judgment is sealed. The chamber broke into chaos, shouts, growls, protests. Yet through it, Liora heard her wolf's voice, clear and fierce inside her chest, at last. We are alive. The Chancellor's staff hammered the floor again, demanding silence. The uproar dwindled but did not die, voices still echoing like restless thunder in the corners of the chamber. Dominion delegates muttered among themselves, eyes bright with indignation. Stormridge wolves stood like carved obsidian, calm on the surface, yet every breath carried the scent of barely leashed readiness. Cale remained standing, tall and immovable, his gaze sweeping across the chamber, as though he owned the ground beneath every foot. Stormridge has spoken. The Omega has spoken. The moot will decide. Lord Halvin, Cassion's father, rose. His voice oozed authority sharpened with spite. Then we demand trial. Trial by challenge, as the accords permit. Let dominance decide truth. A ripple ran through the gathered wolves. Challenge. An ancient law, rarely invoked, blood-soaked in memory. Liora's heart lurched. Trial by challenge meant claws, blood, and a stage where law was settled by dominance, not parchment. She stared at Cale's broad back, knowing the word had been cast like a spear meant for him. The Chancellor hesitated. The right exists. If one side demands it, the other must answer. His gaze flickered toward Cale, as though hoping the Alpha would refuse. Cale's voice rolled like low thunder. Stormridge accepts. Gasps filled the air. Dominion wolves smiled sharp-toothed smiles. Liora stepped forward before she realized she was moving. No, she said. The word cracked against the chamber's marble like a dropped blade. If there is trial, it is mine to fight. They claim me. Let them face me. The hall erupted. Alpha scoffed, Omega stared wide-eyed, the Chancellor banged his staff. Order! Order in the moot! Cale turned, and for the first time his composure trembled. Not with weakness, but with something dangerous and protective. His steel eyes pinned her in place. No, he said softly, but his tone shook like an avalanche in waiting. You will not bleed for their cruelty. My life is what they claim. Liora pressed, voice steadier than her pulse. It is my blood they branded. If this is to be decided by challenge, then it should be me. The wolf inside her stirred fiercely, lifting its head. We are no one's prey. We fight if we must. Cale's jaw tightened. He turned back to the assembly, voice louder, cutting through every protest. Stormridge answers. If there is blood to be spilled, it will be mine. I do not yield my right. The chamber froze. No one questioned an Alpha's declaration once spoken with that kind of finality. The Chancellor, pale but composed, struck the staff again. Then it is decided. At moonrise tomorrow, challenge will be met. Stormridge's Alpha against Dominion's chosen. Cale's gaze shifted to Liora once more, gentling in the storm's eye. You will not be touched, he said, voice meant for her alone. Not while I draw breath. And for the first time in her life, she almost believed safety was possible. The moot adjourned in a storm of whispers. Delegates spilled into corridors heavy with incense and old grudges, but Liora stayed rooted where she stood until Cale touched her elbow. Not command, direction. She followed, her feet moving though her thoughts tangled like thorns. Stormridge guards formed a protective cordon as they left the chamber. Dominion wolves sneered, muttered words like property, trick, Omega, but none stepped forward under Cale's gaze. The air smelled of stone and copper, of challenge already sharpening its claws. When the doors closed behind them, silence pressed down. Liora exhaled hard, a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding since the word trial had been spoken. Cale's stride was long, deliberate, each step echoing authority down the vaulted passage. She hurried to match him. You shouldn't have accepted, she said. The words spilled raw. This is my life they contest, not yours. His reply was low, threaded with iron. They challenge my right to protect you. That makes it mine. Her wolf bristled, half agreeing, half furious. I don't want another master fighting over me. Cale stopped so suddenly she nearly collided with him. He turned, eyes sharp silver, the kind that stripped everything false away. Do not mistake me for them. I did not claim you to cage you. I claimed you to keep them from breaking what is not theirs to touch. Her breath snagged. The words hit deeper than she wanted them to. Still, fear burned through her chest. If you fall, I will not fall. His certainty was a mountain. Yet a flicker of something more vulnerable edged his voice. But if I did, Liora, you still would not return to chains. I swear it. My pack would carry you north, to Stormridge, beyond their reach. It was too much. Too generous, too dangerous to believe. Her wolf strained toward him, desperate, but her human heart trembled, wary of any hand that promised safety. They reached the chamber prepared for her. Inside, a fire glowed, a meal waited. Kale dismissed the guards with a glance and remained at the threshold. He didn't cross it. You will eat. You will rest, he said, softer now, almost weary. Tomorrow I fight. Not for possession. For truth. And until the last breath in me, you will not be touched. His gaze lingered unreadable, then he stepped back and the door closed. Alone, Liora stood in the firelight, the brand on her wrist tingling as though the iron remembered its master. Yet her wolf pressed against her ribs, whispering something new. Not fear. Not despair. Something like hope, jagged and frightening. She touched the moonstone, now dim beside the bread and broth, and wondered whether it had drawn him to her, or whether fate itself had no need of stones. Tomorrow would bring blood. And perhaps freedom. Night thickened around the Dominion's citadel, like a cloak of iron. The corridors outside Leora's chamber quieted, yet she did not sleep. The fire burned low, throwing restless shadows across the stone walls. Her wolf prowled inside her chest, unsettled, nose lifted to sense only half real. She rose and paced, the hem of her servant's gray uniform brushing the floor. Tomorrow would be blood. She tried to imagine Kale falling, steel eyes dimming, shoulders that had seemed unbreakable brought down in the Dominion circle. The thought twisted her stomach. She hated that it mattered. She hated more that her wolf would not accept the image at all. The latch clicked faintly. Liora froze. A sliver of light cut beneath the door. Two voices whispered outside. Should be simple. The Alpha fights, but he's not invincible. Invincible enough. Cashin nearly had his wrist shattered in a single grip. If Draven wins, Dominion loses face before every pack. Then we don't wait for the trial. Tonight we make sure the Omega vanishes. Without her, there's no bond to contest. Her pulse hammered so loud she was certain they'd hear. Her wolf growled low, a rumble only she could feel. Run. Fight. Do not be taken again. Steps shifted closer to her door. She looked around the room. No weapon, only a half-burned log from the fire and the moonstone still glowing faintly where she'd left it. She snatched the stone, clenched it tight. Heat spread into her palm, racing up her arm, her wolf surging with it. The latch rattled. Then a deeper voice cut through the corridor. Try that door, Kale said, and I'll see if your bones break louder than your excuses. Silence. Then hurried retreating steps. The door opened. Kale filled the frame, his presence blotting out the torchlight behind him. He studied her, gaze flicking from her clenched fist to her wide eyes. They came, he said, not a question. Yes, she whispered. His attention lingered on the moonstone. She almost confessed then, told him how it pulsed in her hand like a living heart. But his eyes softened, and the words tangled in her throat. You are not alone, Liora, he said quietly. Even now. Especially now. Her wolf leaned forward inside her, pressing against her skin. Not prey. Not alone. Kale stepped back, gesturing to the guard who now blocked the corridor. Rest. I'll double the watch. No Dominion wolf touches you before the trial. When the door closed again, she sank onto the edge of the bed, stone burning warm in her hand. Tomorrow would come fast, bringing the circle, the blood, and the truth. But tonight, for the first time, she did not feel like prey waiting in silence. Sleep never came. The fire dwindled to embers, and still Liora sat with the moonstone clutched in her palm, listening to the silence beyond the door. Every creak of the citadel, every gust of wind clawing at the shutters felt like a warning. Her wolf prowled restlessly, pacing the edges of her skin, unwilling to settle. Near dawn, a low thud carried through the stone walls. Then another, rhythmical, like a drum buried deep. She crept to the balcony doors and pushed them open. The air was sharp with cold, the sky bruised with the first hint of morning. Below, in the courtyard lit by torches, Kale moved. He trained alone, stripped of the cloak and finery of kingship. Bare arms gleamed with sweat despite the chill, muscles bunching with each strike as he drove his fists into a practice post wrapped in leather. Each blow landed with the sound of inevitability, his body a storm contained in flesh. She had never seen strength like this without cruelty attached. Yet Kale's movements carried no arrogance. They were steady, disciplined, controlled. Power wielded, not flaunted. Leora's wolf lifted its head and growled, not in fear but in fierce recognition. Ours, it whispered. She pressed a hand to her chest, heart racing. No, she told herself. Not ours. Never ours. Choice. As if sensing her gaze, Kale paused. His head tilted upward toward the balcony. Even at this distance, his eyes caught the torchlight, silver, unflinching. He did not smile, but something in his stance shifted. Less a king in training, more a wolf who knew he was seen. She stepped back, breath hitching, retreating into the shadows of her chamber. But the echo of those silver eyes lingered. Later, a tray arrived, bread still warm, fruit, a flask of water. Attached was no servant, only a folded scrap of parchment. 3 words written in bold, deliberate hand. Not property. Ever. Her throat tightened. She set the note beside the moonstone, 2 truths laid bare, one ancient, one new. The scar on her wrist burned, but for the first time, it felt less like ownership and more like defiance. By the time the bell tolled, summoning the packs to gather for the trial, her decision was already made. She would walk into that circle, not as a servant to be argued over, but as Liora. Wolf. Woman. Free, or broken trying. The trial arena was nothing like Liora imagined. No grand marble ring, no polished spectacle, it was raw earth and stone, a circle gouged into the courtyard by centuries of claws and blood. Torches ringed its edges, their flames bending in the morning wind. Wolves crowded the perimeter, Dominion, Stormridge, neutral packs drawn by the promise of scandal. The air hummed with anticipation, sharp as the moment before lightning strikes. Kale stood at the northern edge of the circle, stripped to simple leathers. No crown, no cloak, only power in its purest form. His silver gaze swept across the gathered wolves, steady, unshaken. Beside him, Liora felt the weight of 1,000 eyes pressing down. Whispers rippled like water around her. Omega. Slave. Mate bond. Impossible. The Dominion delegation entered from the opposite side. Lord Draven led them, robes gleaming with the arrogance of ancient entitlement. At his side strode his champion, Thorn, his eldest, tall and broad, with a sneer that cut like glass. His wolf aura pressed outward, suffocating, as if daring the circle itself to bow. By ancient law, Draven intoned, his voice carrying easily over the crowd. We contest Stormridge's false claim. The Omega is Dominion property. The mate bond is fabrication. Trial by combat will prove it. Kale's response was quiet but lethal. This is not property. This is a wolf. And I will fight to prove it. The officiator, an elder neutral alpha, stepped into the ring. The rules are simple. No weapons. No interference. Fight until submission or death. The victor's claim stands. His gaze flicked to Liora, softer for a heartbeat. And the wolf in question is to remain untouched until the circle decides. A drumbeat pounded once, twice. Silence followed. Kale stepped forward, shoulders squared, silver eyes alive with stormlight. Thorn cracked his knuckles and grinned, teeth sharp with hunger. Leora's heart pounded. Her wolf pressed hard against her skin, restless, aching to run into the circle. Ours. Protect. Fight. But she was no Alpha King, no trained warrior. She was a scarred servant with nothing but a hidden moonstone and a bond that refused to be silenced. She clenched her fists, nails digging into her palms. The officiator raised his hand. Begin. The world stilled. Thorn lunged first, a blur of muscle and fury. Kale met him head-on, steel and storm colliding with thunderous force. Dust rose. The crowd roared. And Leora's world narrowed to 2 wolves locked in battle, each strike echoing in her bones. The clash shook the circle. Thorn's fists hammered like falling stone, each strike aimed to break, not bruise. Kale moved with a predator's grace, blocking, twisting, letting the blows glance off hardened muscle before answering with sharp, devastating counters. The crowd bayed like wolves at a hunt. Dust swirled. Torches guttered in the gusts, their movements stirred. Liora gripped the railing at the edge of the circle, her nails biting wood. Every strike Cale took echoed in her chest like her own bones splintered. The bond burned, raw and undeniable. She gasped when Thorn's elbow slammed into Cale's ribs, a dull crack resounding. Pain seared her side as if mirrored in her body. Her wolf howled. Protect him. Ours. Cale straightened, lips curled into the faintest snarl. His eyes flashed silver, not dimmed by the blow but brightened, sharper than blades. He surged forward, driving Thorn back with a flurry of strikes, each one cleaner, heavier, until the Dominion heir staggered. Gasps rippled through the crowd. A servant's omegas should not matter this much. Yet every wolf could smell it now, the bond alive and fierce, wrapping Cale in iron and fire. Draven snarled from the sidelines. Fight harder, boy! Thorn obeyed, shifting partially, claws snapping out, fur bristling along his arms despite the officiator's warning. He lunged with feral speed, claws arcing for Cale's throat. Liora screamed before she could stop herself. Cale ducked, caught the wrist mid-strike, and twisted. The snap of bone was sharp and final. Thorn howled, half wolf, half man, falling to his knees. But Cale didn't finish him. He stood above the Dominion heir, chest heaving, eyes silver fire. Yield! His voice cut through the roar. Yield, or I break more than your arm! For a breath, Thorn's pride warred with his pain. Then his eyes flicked toward Draven, and he spat blood onto the earth. I yield! The officiator's voice rang out. Stormridge is victor! The claim stands. The Omega is free! Cheers erupted from Stormridge wolves. The Dominion delegation seethed, snarling, their fury barely contained. Liora swayed, knees weak, breath shallow. She should have felt triumph. Instead, her chest clenched around something far more dangerous. Relief. And beneath it, a dawning, terrifying hope. The circle emptied slowly, wolves dispersing in tense groups, whispers trailing like smoke. The Dominion's exit was bitter, Lord Draven's glare promising this was not over. Thorn limped beside him, arm bound, his pride more broken than his bones. Cale stood alone in the dust of the circle, shoulders broad, chest rising and falling with measured breaths. Blood streaked his side where Thorn's claws had grazed him. His ribs bore dark bruises, but he did not falter. Liora stepped forward before she could think. Her wolf pulled her, relentless. She stopped just short of the circle, unsure if her legs could carry her closer. Cale's gaze found her instantly. For a moment, there was no crowd, no enemies, no ancient laws, only silver eyes locking onto hers. He extended his hand. Not command. Not possession. Invitation. Her throat tightened. She remembered his note, not property. Ever. For years, her existence had been orders barked, punishments delivered, chains disguised as obedience. And here stood an Alpha King, offering not chains but choice. Her palm trembled as she lifted it, the moonstone still warm inside her sleeve. She stepped into the circle and placed her hand in his. The bond flared so strong the air itself seemed to hum, wolves around them gasping at the force of it. Her wolf surged upward, no longer caged, golden eyes blazing through her human form. Cale's grip tightened, steady and sure. His voice, low but carrying, spoke into the stunned silence. Not slave. Not property. My equal. The crowd erupted, half in outrage, half in awe. And for the first time in her life, Liora lifted her chin, not downcast, not broken, and let them see her. The torches dimmed as the trial's echoes faded, but the storm inside Liora did not ease. Cale still held her hand as they left the circle, his grip warm, steady, a tether through the sea of eyes burning holes into her skin. Dominion wolves hissed their curses. Neutral packs whispered furiously, some in awe, some in scorn. Stormridge wolves followed close, their pride humming like thunder. They passed through the stone archway into the inner halls. Only then did Cale release her hand. The sudden absence of his touch left her dizzy, as though the ground beneath her tilted. "You stood before them," he said quietly, his voice pitched for her alone. "Not bowed. Not broken. That is the only victory that matters." His words warmed her and unsettled her in equal measure. She wanted to believe him, yet the weight of so many stares pressed heavy on her chest. She could still feel the brand on her wrist, a scar that no decree or trial could erase. Free. Equal. The words sounded like dreams spoken in a tongue she hadn't learned yet. A Stormridge healer approached, offering salve and linen for Cale's wounds. He waved them off. "See to her first." The healer turned, bowing slightly toward Liora. "Lady." "Don't," she interrupted, the word sharp and trembling. "Don't call me that. I'm no lady." The healer's eyes softened with something like pity, but he said nothing more, simply bowing and retreating. Cale's gaze lingered on her, unreadable. "They will call you what you are. Even if it takes time for you to believe it." Her throat closed around a dozen questions, none of them safe. Instead, she pressed the only truth she had. "I don't know how to be free." For the first time, Cale's silver eyes softened, stormlight dimming to something quieter. "Then let freedom be a thing we learn together." Before she could answer, Liora swept into the corridor, her cloak of authority cutting through the charged silence. "Dominion is already moving to contest the ruling," she said grimly. "Draven won't yield. He'll twist the law until he finds a blade to press against us." Cale's jaw tightened. "Then we stay ready." Lyra's gaze flicked to Liora, assessing, curious. Not cruel, never cruel, but sharp enough that Liora fought the urge to lower her eyes. Lyra smiled faintly, a diplomat's smile. "Stormridge has a Luna now, whether she accepts the title or not." The words struck harder than any brand. "Luna. Alpha's mate. Queen." Her wolf surge thrilled. Her human heart recoiled, afraid. She whispered, almost to herself, "What if I can't be what they expect?" Cale's hand brushed hers again, grounding her. "Then you'll be what you choose. And that will be enough." But Liora wasn't certain. Not yet. Stormridge chambers were quieter, but quiet did not mean safe. Liora sat near the tall windows, moonlight painting her skin pale as frost. Outside, the citadel seemed to sleep, yet her wolf sensed the restlessness in the air, the scrape of claws in distant corridors, the sharp tang of fear masked as discipline. Lyra's words echoed, "Stormridge has a Luna now." Liora hugged her knees to her chest. She was no Luna. She was a servant who had learned how to survive unseen. To pour wine without trembling. To bow her head at cruelty and not let the tears show. A Luna was strength, grace, command. She was none of those things. The door opened, soft but sure. Cale entered, carrying the weight of battle and law across his shoulders. His ribs were bound now, his shirt plain, his steps deliberate as always. He did not speak until the door closed. "They're moving already," he said, voice low. "Draven sends envoys to the guild. Dominion refuses to accept defeat. They will come for you again." Her stomach dropped. "Because of me?" "No." He crossed the room, his presence filling the air until it hummed. "Because truth threatens them. The bond only exposed what they work years to bury." She searched his eyes, silver reflecting moonlight, steady but fierce. "And what if I'm not strong enough to be what they need me to be? What if I can't carry it?" His jaw tightened, but his voice gentled. "Strength is not a crown, Liora. It's not standing above them, it's refusing to kneel when they demand it. Today you did that. And tomorrow and the next day, you will do it again. That is enough." Her throat closed, emotions tangling in knots she could not unravel. She whispered the fear that burned deepest. "Every time I trust, I'm broken." Cale knelt before her, lowering himself until his eyes were level with hers. For an alpha, for a king, it was an act louder than any vow. "Then let this be the first time trust does not end in chains." The bond flared hot, fierce, a thread tugging between them until her wolf pressed hard against her skin, desperate to close the space. Her human heart warred with it, trembling, afraid. A knock shattered the moment. Lyra's voice, clipped and urgent, cut through the door. Alpha! Dominion riders were sighted on the southern road. They're not retreating, they're circling back. Cale's eyes darkened, storm gathering. He rose in a fluid motion, already Alpha once more. Then war comes sooner than they think. Leora's hand gripped the edge of her chair, knuckles white. The fire they had kindled in the circle was not the end, it was only the spark. The stronghold pulsed with motion before dawn. Stormridge wolves moved like a single body, boots striking stone, armor buckled, messages carried through narrow corridors. The air was sharp with iron and pine, the scent of readiness before a storm. Liora lingered at the edge of it all, her hands twisting together as she watched warriors prepare. She had been invisible all her life, now every glance lingered too long. Some looked at her with respect, others with suspicion. To them she was either Luna, omen, or a liability. Cale convened his council in the war chamber, a room carved from black stone, its walls etched with runes older than memory. Liora slipped inside quietly, drawn by necessity more than belonging. Maps sprawled across the central table, marked with Dominion sigils pressing at Stormridge's borders. Lyra stood tall beside her brother, her voice clipped and precise. If Draven circles south, he means to cut supply lines. He wants us stretched thin before we can rally allies. Garen, the war commander, slammed his fist onto the table. Then we strike first. Meet them on the plains and crush them before they dig their claws in. Cale's voice cut through the tension, calm but edged. If we strike rashly, we give Draven what he wants, a war painted as Stormridge aggression. No. We hold. We defend. The council muttered, some bristling, some nodding. Lyra's amber gaze flicked toward Liora, acknowledging her silent presence without judgment. And her? Lyra asked. Dominion won't stop until she is in their claws again. That brand on her wrist is worth more to them than territory. She is proof of their crimes. The words struck like a blow. Liora fought the instinct to lower her eyes, to shrink into shadow. Cale's reply came swift, unyielding. She will not be surrendered. Not to them. Not to anyone. His gaze found hers across the chamber. For an instant, the council, the maps, the threat of war vanished. Only those silver eyes, steady and absolute, tethered her in place. Lyra broke the silence. Then we prepare for more than defense. Dominion will try to take her quietly before they risk open battle. Every shadow, every silence must be watched. The council agreed reluctantly, and the meeting dissolved into orders and strategies. But as wolves moved to carry out Cale's commands, Liora felt the truth pressing in. She was not just free. She was dangerous, to herself, to him, to all of Stormridge. And somewhere in the Dominion's halls, Draven was already sharpening his claws on the chains he meant to bind her with again. Her wolf stirred, fierce, unafraid. Not again. Never again. Night settled heavy over Stormridge's stronghold, a cloak stitched with unease. Torches burned low in the corridors, their flames spitting shadows that stretched like claws. The halls were quieter now, but not still, never still. Boots clicked distantly, whispers traveled faster than fire, and the scent of steel lingered in the air. Liora could not sleep. Freedom sat jagged in her chest, too new, too fragile. Her wolf prowled restlessly, every creak of stone whispering danger. She rose, wrapping herself in a cloak, and wandered into the narrow halls where the torches sputtered. Voices drifted from the outer courtyard. She stilled, pressing into an alcove carved deep into the wall. Two figures, cloaked and low-voiced, moved near the gate. The Alpha King bleeds easier than legend says. Thorn's arm is broken, but his spirit's not gone. Dominion will send more. The girl is the key. If she's taken, Stormridge fractures. Bonds mean weakness, not strength. A pause. A sound like parchment unfolding. Orders are clear. Find a way inside her chamber. Before dawn. Her heart thudded so violently she feared they'd hear it. She shrank deeper into shadow, every muscle trembling. Her wolf snarled inside, teeth bared, pressing against her ribs with urgency. Run. Warn. Protect. She edged back along the wall, breath shallow. But the cloaked figures stiffened suddenly, noses lifting. Wolves. They had caught her scent. Who's there? One growled, voice sharp with suspicion. Leora's pulse roared in her ears. She fled, bare feet slapping stone, cloak trailing like wings behind her. Down twisting corridors, up narrow stairs, her lungs burned but she did not stop. The moonstone pressed hot against her wrist, flaring with strange energy. Her wolf surged, golden eyes threatening to break through her human skin. She reached her chamber door and shoved it open, slamming it shut behind her. Kale was inside. Waiting. His silver eyes took her in instantly. Wild breath, terror, the scent of dominion still clinging to her. His jaw tightened. What did you hear? She clutched the doorframe, shaking. They're coming. Tonight. For me. For a heartbeat, silence. Then Kale's wolf surged through his eyes, silver blazing like fire on snow. Then let them come. The alarm bell clanged, sharp and sudden, its echoes ricocheting off stone. Kale was already moving, hand gripping Leora's arm as though the bond itself pulled him to shield her. He shoved the door open, storming into the corridor. Guards fell into formation instantly, their wolves bristling as they scented the intruders. South wing! One shouted. The clang of steel followed, shouts rising as Dominion wolves forced their way past Stormridge sentries. Kale's voice cracked like thunder. Form the line. No one crosses. His silver eyes cut toward her, fierce and unyielding. Stay behind me. Leora's instincts screamed otherwise. She had lived her life behind. Behind doors, behind walls, behind orders. But her wolf surged, restless, refusing to cower. She pressed the moonstone tight in her palm. Its heat flared, her heartbeat sinking to the strange rhythm pulsing within. Shadows spilled around the bend of the hall. Cloaked wolves, Dominion's infiltrators, their eyes gleaming with hunger and hatred. Hand her over, one snarled. No trial, no law protects her now. She belongs to us. Kale stepped forward, blocking their view of her entirely. His wolf aura rolled through the hall, raw power pressing against stone, so potent it bent the torch flames sideways. She belongs to no one, he said, his voice cutting with lethal calm. Least of all cowards who skulk through shadows. The Dominion wolves lunged. Steel flashed. The corridor exploded with chaos. Kale moved like the storm his name carried, each strike precise, devastating. His guards matched him, forming a living wall. Still, Dominion pressed hard, snarling, desperate to reach her. Leora's breath came fast, her wolf howling inside her chest. She should stay back. She should hide. That was what Omegas did. But the moonstone seared her palm, her vision blurring with gold. For one terrifying, liberating moment, she felt her wolf claw forward, not caged, not hidden, but alive. When a Dominion infiltrator slipped past the guards, lunging straight for her, she didn't retreat. She ducked his swing, pivoted, and drove the searing moonstone into his chest. Light flared. He screamed, flung backward as though struck by lightning. Every wolf froze. Liora stood trembling, golden fire glowing faintly in her eyes. The brand on her wrist burned, not with shame but with defiance. Kale's gaze snapped to her, a storm contained in flesh. But this time his expression was not just protective, it was something fiercer. Recognition. The battle ended swiftly after that. Stormridge guards pressed the advantage, Dominion wolves retreating with snarls of frustration. Their leader spat blood onto the stones. This isn't finished, he hissed before vanishing into the shadows with the rest. The stronghold fell into ragged silence, broken only by the panting of exhausted wolves. Kale's presence filled the corridor, his dominance wrapping around his people like armor. Yet his eyes stayed locked on Liora. He crossed to her, steps deliberate, the air between them crackling. What did you do? His tone was low, not accusing, but urgent. Leora's fingers uncurled slowly, revealing the moonstone still glowing faintly, its light fading with her breath. I don't know, she admitted. It felt like my wolf finally woke. Kale's jaw tightened, but his gaze softened. Not woke, he murmured. Unleashed. Her knees weakened, the weight of what she'd done pressing hard. She expected anger, fear, accusation. Instead, Kale extended his hand, not command, not demand, but steady offering. Walk with me. She placed her hand in his, drawn by a gravity she could not deny. Together they left the ruined corridor behind. The war council gathered within minutes, tension thick in the chamber. Lyra's eyes blazed as she listened to Leora's halting recount. A moonstone shouldn't do that, Lyra said sharply. Not unless. She cut herself off, gaze flicking toward Kale. Unless what? Leora demanded, voice trembling. Lyra folded her arms. Unless you carry blood that answers to it. Blood older than Dominion, older than Stormridge. A chill rippled down Leora's spine. You're saying. Kale cut in, his voice steady but sharp. She's saying what I've already begun to suspect. You were not born a servant, Liora. Dominion didn't mark you because you were nothing. They marked you because you were too much. The chamber fell silent. The words hung between them, heavy as prophecy. Leora shook her head, backing a step. No. I'm no one. I've always been no one. Kale's eyes caught hers, silver burning. Then why does fate keep proving otherwise? Sleep was impossible. Leora sat on the edge of the bed in her chamber, moonlight slanting across the floor. Her wolf paced inside her, restless, agitated. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the infiltrator's face, twisted in shock as the moonstone's light flung him away. She had done that. Somehow. The door opened softly. Kale stepped inside, without armor now, his presence filling the room all the same. He closed the door behind him, leaving the chaos of the stronghold outside. For a long moment neither spoke. He leaned against the wall, watching her with eyes that saw too much. She couldn't bear the silence. You should be angry, she whispered. I broke every rule tonight. I revealed myself. I made everything worse. Kale pushed away from the wall, crossing the space between them until he stood a breath away. Worse? His voice was quiet, rough-edged. You stood against Dominion with nothing but your courage and a stone in your hand. You proved you are not their prey. Her chest ached. But I don't know what I am. Servant. Omega. Something else. Everyone keeps telling me I'm more, but all I feel is lost. Kale's hand lifted, hovering near her cheek without touching. His restraint was almost unbearable. Then be lost for now, he said. You've earned that. But know this, lost or found, branded or free, you are mine. Her wolf surged forward, golden eyes pressing against her vision, desperate to close the space. Her human heart trembled, terrified of cages, even gilded ones. And if I don't want to belong to anyone? She whispered. His silver gaze darkened, stormlight flickering. Then you belong only to yourself. But the bond. His voice broke slightly, a rare crack in the Alpha's steel. The bond does not lie. And I will never deny it. The moonstone pulsed faintly between them, as if echoing his words. Leora closed her eyes. For the first time in years, she let her wolf breathe without suppression. The night seemed to hold its breath with her, waiting. Dawn broke over Stormridge like a blade drawn from its sheath, cutting through the night's tension with cold light. The stronghold stirred, wolves gathering in the courtyard, whispers carrying the weight of what had happened. Dominion had been driven back, for now. Yet the shadow of their threat still loomed, long and sharp. Leora stood on the balcony, cloak drawn around her shoulders. The air was crisp, filled with pine and frost, and somewhere deep within her chest her wolf stretched, no longer caged. For the first time, she let it move freely. The fear was still there, yes, but it was no longer stronger than the pulse of possibility. Behind her, Kale entered quietly, as he always did, his presence filling the air before he spoke. They'll come again, he said, gaze fixed on the horizon where Dominion lands lay hidden in haze. But they won't find you the same as before. She turned to him, searching his silver eyes. I'm not the servant they branded, she admitted softly. But I'm not ready to be loon either. Kale closed the distance between them, not as a king, not as an alpha who could command armies, but as a man who understood loss. He reached for her hand, steady and sure. Then be Liora, he said simply. Not their property, not their prize. Just yours. And if you'll have it, mine. The bond between them surged, hot and undeniable, the thread of wolf and heart tightening until her breath caught. For years, choice had been denied to her. But here, now, with the sun rising over stone and steel, she found the courage to make one. Her fingers closed around his. Yours, she whispered. Then, fiercer, with her wolf's golden fire in her eyes. But also mine. Kale's answering smile was rare and devastating, a storm breaking into sunlight. He drew her closer, not as a cage, but as a shield. Around them, the stronghold prepared for war. Within them, something older and stronger prepared for life. The scars on her wrists still burned, but no longer with shame. They were proof. She had survived chains. And now, with Kale at her side, she would survive freedom. Whatever storm Dominion brought next, she was ready. For the first time in her life, Liora was not nothing. She was wolf. She was free. And she was no longer alone.